Bardejov, a new direct-to-streaming film, debuted online recently. It's a small, independent film that tells the story of Rafuel Lowy, a Jewish leader in the Slovakian town of Bardejov, who worked to save his fellow Jews from being sent to Auschwitz during World War II. My review is coming up. Hey there, y'all. Tim Risto here, host of the Creative Christians Podcast, joining you once again for another episode of AfterThoughts. Thanks for watching. It is so good to have you here today, and I hope it's a great day for you wherever you are. I've got another film review for you today. First, for those of you who watched my previous film review of Cabrini, I'd just like to take a quick moment to say thank you for your views, comments, subscriptions, and overall support. That review went viral and put my YouTube channel on the next level. So I'm grateful for all your support and encouragement. Thank you so much for that. So today I'm back with another review. I'm reviewing an independent film, Bardejov. My regular viewers may be asking, hey Tim, why are you reviewing a film about the Jewish faith on your Creative Christians Afterthoughts show? Part of what I do here at Creative Christians Afterthoughts is to look at a variety of pop culture, including various films, books, and music, and examine the creative, technical, and faith-related aspects of such projects, Christian or not, and examine them through the lens of my own personal creative experiences, my faith, and biblical worldview. I tend to emphasize, of course, Christian creatives on the show. That is the show. But from time to time, I do like to examine other projects that may fall outside of that specific focus. Full transparency here, I was personally invited to review the film by a member of the film's cast. I was not compensated in any way, nor have I been encouraged to give a positive review. I was simply invited to review it. So what follows are my genuine thoughts on the film. And finally, I was also just plain curious about the film. When I got the invite to review it and saw the trailer, I generally wanted to watch the film and see what it was all about. So you're probably asking, what is it about? Is it any good? Let's get into it. I will be getting into some spoilers ahead, so proceed at your own risk. But in short, up front, it's a good film. It's a lower budget project, so you have to have your expectations set accordingly. But there are some nice talents behind the scenes on this project. Bardejov stars Robert Davi, whom I loved in the Timothy Dalton James Bond film License to Kill. Some may remember him from The Goonies and many other films and TV shows. He's been around a while and in many projects. It's directed by Danny Abekasar, who directed Holy Rollers and also Club Life. Now, in an age of films where Marvel superheroes reign supreme, or at least did not too long ago, and CGI runs amok, it's so nice to discover a smaller film with heart, intent upon saying something important and revealing a little-known human interest dramatic story that taps into history in a profound and meaningful way. I'm going to give my full detailed review at the end, but let's talk about the story first because there's lots going on here. Bardejov is a Holocaust story based upon a true story and real people. Now, much like my review of Cabrini, I'm not familiar with the specifics behind the true story. This film is my only exposure to it, so I can't comment on what's true in this film and what may have been changed or dramatized for the movie itself. But the film starts with the text, "This is the true story of a 7-year-old boy, Emil Fish, who survived the Holocaust to tell us what happened in his town of Bardejov." Emil's importance will become apparent later. The film then opens with a brief prologue set in 2005, essentially present day for this story, with an elderly Emil Fish. This is the actual man himself, not an actor. He's being driven into modern-day Bardejov with some family, presumably his daughter and granddaughter, I'd guess, although I don't think they're ever identified. They talk about how beautiful the town is. Emil says, "You should have seen it back then." We're then flashed back to 1932 as Emil, via voiceover, tells us how Bardejov had a market street back in those days, with Jews on one side, Slovakians on the other, but that there was a good friendship between the two, a mutual respect. We come back to the present day. Emil and family arrive at what he says was his Heder, a Jewish school, where he learned the Bible and all about the Jewish customs and faith. Then he mentions a nader. His granddaughter asks, "What is a nader?" He says it's a promise to the Jews that they will never be forgotten. She then asks Emil, what happened to the Jews here? Camera slowly pans up to Emil's face. He is obviously lost in memories, and we're led back into the past to the primary storyline for the film, setting it in 1942. Here, Linka guards, who are the Slovakian state police, have arrived in the small Jewish town of Bardejov, Slovakia. They are forcing all Jews to register for work. The Hlinka have made a deal with the Nazis, who are actually working to deport the Jews out of Bardejov under the false narrative of work orders. They send kids in the community out to deliver the work orders to the Jews. One of the delivery kids may have been Emil, maybe not. He was only 7 at the time. We're not told where he is in all of this, at least that I can recall. Either way, Emil is not a main character per se in this story. But as mentioned, his importance will be revealed later, and that opening scene in 2005 sets the stage for that later on. Soon we're introduced to Rafuel Lowy, portrayed extremely well by actor Robert Davi. More on his acting later. Lowy is a successful businessman, winemaker, and rabbi leader of the Jews in Bardejov. We are told in the voiceover that those who knew him respect him, those who didn't feared him. His wife is Rosa, portrayed by actress Maya Rubin, who is really more of a cameo character, although she does appear occasionally throughout the film. She usually is there to help ground Lowy. As the intensity of conflict with the Linka guards ramps up, Rafuel and the Jewish Council decide they need to temporarily stop the influx of Jews into Bardejov to prevent them from being deported, as it is no longer safe for them. Helena, one of the councilman's daughters who helps with the Jewish rescue effort, resists stopping her rescue operations as she is passionate about helping her people. Sergeant Stefan Reichstetter, portrayed by Dean Miroshnikov, is really good, portraying the Jew-hating Linka guard with equal amounts of evil and a steadily growing loss of self-confidence. The Linka mostly hate the Jews. The guards are set to be swapped out with a new contingent of replacement guards who will fulfill the latest orders from Germany, which is gathering 100 boys for the next work order. Stefan, upset at being replaced and overlooked, changes his orders. Instead of waiting for when the replacement guards arrive, Stefan intends to show his superiors in the Hlinka that he and his men know how to round up the Jews, and gathers at least some of the 100 Jewish boys in Lowy's wine cellar to fulfill the order just prior to the replacements arriving the next day. As this is going on, it results in a tense standoff between Stefan and Rafuel in the winery. Stefan says to him, Herr Lowy, the Jews running things in Bardejov is a thing of the past. He wants his words to be prophetic. Linka are clearly the stand-ins for the Nazis, with clear parallels being drawn throughout the film. They are the errand boys of the Germans, as Lowy puts it, often visually framed in such a way to further draw that connection. The Linka Guard flags can be seen flying, much like we've often seen the Nazi flag in other films, framed behind Kovac and other Linka, flying like a symbol of fear and tyranny. Same with the Linka Guard symbol on their armbands as well. While it's clear the Linka hate Jews and are portrayed as evil, one guard is the exception. Adam Bamba is a Linka guard who sympathizes with the plight of the Jews and helps them, routinely providing inside information, though fearful of his cover being blown at any time. The night the boys are rounded up, Helena helps some of the boys escape, while the guards are partying and getting drunk outside. When the replacement Linka arrive in the morning, they find Stefan and his men asleep and discover one of the remaining boys with a fever. They suspect typhus. The fear and reaction to the threat of typhus is apparent on the Linka's faces, and this becomes important later on as well. Helena continues her rescue efforts, paying Linka guard Ivan to get more Jews out from being held prior to being deported. The storyline then flashes ahead to 3 weeks later, which is where things start building toward the climax. A new order is issued to round up 400 Jewish girls for work in a shoe factory in the east. This happens suddenly and without any intel warning. Adam, the Jewish sympathizer, informs Lowy that he didn't know this order was coming down. They were all kept in the dark by the newly arrived Bardejov operation captain, General Kovacs, who arrived with the replacement guards. Lowy confronts General Kovac, who is portrayed nicely by Henry David, not David Henry, by the way, who's another actor altogether, but Kovacs dismisses him. It's revealed that General Kovacs and Lowy have a history and know each other from Bratislava. You get the sense a confrontation is brewing. Spoiler here, it doesn't really come. At least not the way you might expect. Stefan continues to assert to Kovacs that he and his men can handle the roundup of Jews. But Kovacs disagrees, still seeing Stefan as unconfident and incompetent. He tells Stefan it's nothing personal. Guards are switched out all over Poland. He also says Stefan and his men are too friendly with the Jews, implying that is his weakness. Helena and several other girls are slated to go as part of the 400-girl work order and are rounded up and held until the train arrives to take them east. Lowy decides to head to Bratislava, to the resistance, the underground, in search of help. There he learns the train is not going east. There is no shoe factory in the east. The train will instead take the girls to the death camp at Auschwitz. Back in Bardejov, the Jewish council weighs their options and decides they must let the girls go, despite the odds stacked against them. Upon his return, Lowy angrily attacks Stefan, who draws a gun on him but can't bring himself to shoot, with Lowy breaking down in laughter at Stefan's cowardice. With Lowy back, the Jewish council meets again to determine next steps. Lowy proposes using gunpowder and explosives from his winery to blow up Bardejov to save the girls and prevent the Germans from succeeding in their plans of deporting more and more Jews to death camps. After proposing this, Rafuel says there will be no train leaving for Auschwitz tomorrow. But another councilman challenges this line of thinking, saying, "What does God say?" And here, I don't think he says yes. This is one of several great examples in the film of the Jews routinely seeking God's will and what they should do, despite their human nature sometimes prompting them to want to follow their own will or to retaliate in violence. Later, Adam delivers a message from the imprisoned girls to Rafuel the night before the train is set to leave for Auschwitz. As the countdown continues and the tension grows, there is little time left to come up with a plan to save the girls. But Rafuel makes a proposal that builds upon the Linka's fear of typhus. It's kind of an ingenious plan, not without risks, and requires help from several key people. But it's less deadly than blowing up Bardejov. I'm not going to spoil the end of the film here. I've given you quite a bit here already, but I'll leave you to discover the ending for yourself. Much of the film really is more about how it plays out, the growing tension at each step, rather than about revealing plot points of the story itself. The film does end a bit abruptly. Things get wrapped up a bit too tidy, too fast, but it is based on a true story, and maybe that's how it all actually went down. I don't know. This is a Holocaust story told in the same vein as Schindler's List. The story gives an interesting and horrific glimpse into this time in history and gives voice to the plight of the Jewish people in Bardejov during World War II. While some may argue that Lowy is no Schindler, and this film is no Schindler's List, Lowy is an unsung hero, and certainly this story is worthy of being told. This is a slow burn kind of drama, punctuated by several smaller moments of tension along the way. It's a very human drama story, a character study in some ways, and a historical film. While its setting is during World War II, it is not an action film. It is, at its heart, a smaller story about the plight of the Jews in Bardejov and Lowy's and the Jewish people's efforts there to save them from the concentration camp at Auschwitz. Most of the acting is quite good as well. Robert Davi is a standout and exceptionally good here. He grounds the entire production. I've always admired his work as a character actor, and while I don't know anything about the real-life Lowy outside of this film, to me, Davi becomes Lowy. His first scene and delivery of his opening line, "You couldn't wait until a decent hour," in that deep, gravelly voice, really sets the tone for his character, and he commands the screen right from the outset as he challenges the Hlinka captain, Stefan. Lowy is a man to be reckoned with. But he is also extremely vulnerable. Later, when he finds out there is no shoe factory in the town where the 400 girls are supposedly being taken to work, and it's revealed the trains are actually taking the girls to Auschwitz, the pain and desperation on his face is intense. He's not afraid to portray Lowy as both fearless and also vulnerable, breaking into tears at times when he is at his wit's end and at a loss for an immediate solution to their plight. This film exemplifies Davi's acting talent. Lionel Cohen's haunting music score is a standout of the film, to be sure, and has an authentic Jewish feel about it, while also building tension as needed at select points throughout the film. It's quite good. The cinematography is by Barry Markowitz, known for films like Crazy Heart, The Apostle, and Sling Blade, one of my favorites. It's very professionally done. The choice of color palette, however, is a bit unusual, at least to my eyes. It's shot in a high contrast, very yellowish kind of saturated tint. It's just not my favorite choice, not my cup of tea. You may disagree. Some shots have a darker, murky kind of feel to them, more like Sling Blade was, if I recall correctly, which does fit the mood of the piece. Generally, the film is shot tight, lots of close-ups and medium shots. This enhances the emotion and intensity of the acting and drama, but also amplifies the claustrophobic feel of the Jews trapped in Bardejov by the Linka, trapped by an impending death at the hands of the Nazis. Realistically, some of the use of close-ups may also have been done to avoid needing more period-specific props, which they may not have had the budget or time to construct. So wide shots of the setting are very minimal. As a result, the film feels smaller. But again, this fits pretty well with the drama of the more intimate story being told, so it doesn't really bother me. Locations and settings are effective and consistently good for this story. One thing I really found interesting, according to IMDb, this movie was shot in 13 days. 12 days in Tel Aviv, Israel, 1 day in Slovakia. That's a very tight shooting schedule, really tight. It's not an easy task to shoot an entire film in 13 days, so kudos to the production for making it happen. No, the film is not perfect. It's not a Schindler's List. It is a low-budget, independent film, and it does show in places. But here's what it really all comes down to. Emil Fish and his nader. Besides the immense gravity of the historical importance of a story based upon saving the Jews from Nazi death camps, there's also a spiritual takeaway that, as a Christian, I found very valuable. While doing everything they can to save themselves from the death camps, even, as mentioned, contemplating blowing up the town at one point, the Jews of Bardejov showcase the value of their faith. Despite the rising tension all around them, the impending train departure that will send the girls to Auschwitz, they maintain their worship schedule and they seek God's will. I'm not Jewish, but I admire the way they pursue their faith in this story, despite the odds stacked against them, and that they strive to follow God's will even when their lives are on the line. They adhere to their faith rituals despite the incredible interruption in their lives. Fasting is an important practice during Purim, and they maintain that as well, despite the effect it has on them physically with lack of food at a time when they need every bit of energy they can muster. Also, the filmmakers could have turned this into a Hollywood spectacle film, maybe even having secured a bigger budget on that premise alone. And they could have chosen to veer away from the truth and simply made an action-oriented ending with Lowy planting explosives around the town and blowing up the Linka guards in spectacular fashion, thwarting the Nazis' plans and sending a vicious message to Germany. But they didn't. They stuck to Emil's story of events, made a small film that told a bit more intimate story and a far more important one. I admire the chutzpah it took, to use a Yiddish term, to make the film in this way. The closing reveals that Emil Fish, the elderly man from the opening scene, who was 7 years old at the time of the Bardejov events during World War II, was fulfilling his nader, his promise to the Jews, by making sure this story of his people was told and that we never forget about them and the lives horribly lost in the concentration camps like Auschwitz and elsewhere. It is a fitting closing to the film. The role of Emil Fish, who is listed as a producer of this film, becomes dramatically clear in those closing shots. He had every intention of fulfilling his nader, and he has. We're told he went on to restore the Bardejov Jewish Cemetery, founded the Jewish Preservation Committee, is creating the Bardejov Holocaust Museum, and produced this film, all in support of his nader, so that the world would never forget what happened to the Jews of Bardejov. What an amazing way to fulfill a promise. What an amazing way to live out one's faith. How many of us have put our faith into action, as well as Emil Fish? If I had to pick one scene that sums up this film, I know which one it would be. Once again, mild spoiler alert, so proceed at your own risk. But late in the film, one night, in a tension-filled exchange, Adam Bamba, the Jewish sympathizer, returns to the Linka guard station. Stefan, drunk, confronts him, accusing him of treason, knowing he's a Jewish sympathizer at this point. Adam responds, "People deserve better than what you're doing to the Jews." Stefan vilely spits out, "Jews are not people."
People deserve better. Jews are not people!
Adam calmly and defiantly responds, "We're all God's people." Such a great line and a wonderful moment exemplifying the story's emphasis on standing up for one's faith, for the needs and lives of others, as well as the need to seek God's will in all that we do, even in the face of uncertainty and death. It's really a very good scene. I think it kind of sums up Bekasar's directing in this piece, the acting, Emil Fish's story, and his nadir. Never forget. So as you can see, it really is all about Emil Fish and his nadir. Now, Bardejov may not be the most polished film. It has its rough spots, but it has its heart in the right place and is certainly worth your viewing time. It aims high and shares a story that is significant and worth having experienced. With expectations set accordingly, I'd recommend checking out the film. It's a good story and has some powerful moments in it. Produced by Yoav Gross and written by Shmuel Lin, based upon a story by Emil Fish, and directed by Danny Bekasar and starring Robert Davi. Bardejov started streaming on March 19th on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, and Fandango at home. Definitely recommended. That's all for this review. See you next time. Remember, stay creative, and above all else, stay in God's Word. Bye, y'all. Also, if you have not heard the Creative Christians podcast, please head on over to my Buzzsprout page. The link is on screen now, and it's also in the description below. Check it out. It's all about Christians and creatives and how their faith influences their work and creativity. Well worth checking out. You can also go to Apple Podcasts or any other podcast distributor. We are all over the place. Just search for Creative Christians and Tim Risto.